Hey everyone! So Fool's Scales, holy crap, was this quite the event and the long-awaited ending to an arc that we've been wanting. For quite some time we've known Marco Polo was up to something, but we hadn't the slightest idea what it was until now. What was also nice was seeing all of the major concepts, no pun intended, from previous events having some impact here. From the Horsemen of Conquest and the Black Sun of Revelations of Dust, to the Black Mist enemies from Confluence of Nothingness, and many, many more things from other events. To say that this event was packed with a lot of things would still be quite a bit of an understatement, since it gave closure to various ends and opened up new doors for discussion. There's quite a bit to take in here. That said, let's dive into what we can say we learned from this event, be it closure or new points. A quick disclaimer that everything in this video should be taken with a grain of salt, as things can very much change, and we could be horribly wrong. That said, let's look into what we've learned. The biggest and most important thing I would say about this event that really made me happy to see was that the Iris Orthodoxy is no longer divided, but rather now has reunited together as one. After everything they've been through, from back in Iris of Light and Dark to now, the internal conflict between the Iris Libre and the Vicid Dominion was one that was hard for both sides to deal with. Over the past few events, we could definitely tell that both sides didn't want to fight each other, and the uneasiness that was clearly visible on both ends. To finally see them all stand together as one, and later come together to crown Richelieu their leader, was quite a touching moment for many, I'm sure. However, this moment is quite a bit short-lived, as Richelieu rejects the crown, granted not the throne, and proceeds to destroy it. What's fascinating about her destroying the crown is her justification for it. During that battle, however, I saw another crown, a megalomaniac's ambition, a tool exploited to selfish ends, a product of siren technology made to make fools of us. At some point in history, the Sirens replaced the original crown with this one here. In truth, we have been worshipping a false god for a very long time. We should not be reliant on a flawed belief that can be easily bent and distorted. What's interesting about this particular situation is that this isn't technically the first time a claim like this has come forth for something a specific faction has held in high regard. The Sakura Empire has had this moment as well, with their famous Watatsumi. In Swirling Cherry Blossoms, we learn of this through Takao Meta. The thing, known as Watatsumi, is not a sacred artifact, but a manifestation of calamity. By feeding upon the negative emotions through the land, it eventually ushers forth untold destruction. This stone does not exist in your world. If the crown were to be a similar item as the Watatsumi, then we've seen what untold destruction can mean to this world. From the large mechanical threats that we called gazers in this event, to the metallic, mycelium-like growths rapidly spreading across the land, and even the abominations that were being created from the mycelia, the dangers these objects can bring is something that really needs to be considered. However, if it did not exist in our world here, then how did it get here in the first place? Who brought them here? And why? Now, one could argue the Sirens, but I think there's a bit more to this than simply blaming it on them. You see, one of the last chapters of this event is solely with the Empress. She's clearly running what seems like tests and analyzing the recent events of this particular branch. After looking through all the data available to her, she is able to make one main conclusion: Deus Ex is involved. Now, Deus Ex, or simply referred to as X in other servers, is a name that at first seems new to us, but in reality, this is the more common name used for characters in the OG timeline, for Leviathan. We still don't have a lot of information on this particular enemy, but the most recent art book gave us a bit more information on them. The shape, attack method, and biological characteristics of X are hidden in a mysterious mist. At the same time, it possesses incredible power, even on par with a natural disaster, and cannot be destroyed by any force that mankind can think of. This also gives us a bit more information behind the Sirens, who we know to have additional names like Antiochus and have also been referred to as Anti-X. In order to discover the true nature of X and find a way to fight it, Sirens used the natural calculation system and the time leap system to return to the past As a corollary, numerous whorl lines, or branches, are closely observed by them. Now, granted, this isn't much for us to really go off with, but we are starting to see two very interesting pictures being painted here. First, there's clearly a picture starting to be painted that the Sirens aren't really the true enemy of Azur Lane, or humanity for all that matters. While the Sirens may not be acting in the best of humanity's goals and wishes, there's clearly an additional angle to this that we haven't fully seen yet. And we can see a bit of this with our newest Arbiter that has finally been revealed, the Hierophant. I'm glad to finally have this one named and known now. She's been a mystery for a while, and I'm pleased we get some closure around this particular character. It's also cool to know that she was the first of the Arbiters to be created, but I will say that she brings an entire new issue here with her sheer presence. Now, her being the main threat of this event does make the previous point about the Sirens not being enemies seem, well, off. But let's go back a bit, shall we? Empress brings up Hierophant in her solo cutscene and calls her an abnormal Hierophant vessel. With what we learned from parallel superimposition, abnormal vessels should normally be terminated and replaced upon discovery. This was a failsafe that Oust gave to the Antiochus mainframes. That said, one of the last scenes in Confluence of Nothingness, it looked like the Ashes were going to do something with that hermit. It makes me believe that it's possible that the vessels of Arbiters, and maybe even other Sirens, could be corrupted and controlled. This may seem odd now, but let's also bring something else to consider, and that comes from Operation Siren Chapter 5. Zero gave us instructions to minimize contact with the test's subjects. If the Arbiters are under orders to avoid contact as much as possible, this whole move with Hierophant goes completely against what Observer Zero wants. We can even include the Devil in this particular example to a degree from this event as well as previous ones. Both the Hierophant and Devil seem to be doing something very different from what they were ordered to. Even the tower notices something odd about the Devil at the end of Confluence of Nothingness. Something is very off about both of them, which leads me to suspect that they are both compromised in that regard. It's likely this Deus Ex might have control of them. Granted, nothing else is known about what happened to Hierophant at the end of this event, so we'll have to see later on. But this is where the second picture is. Something really bad is coming, and who knows what will happen. It's worth noting that Bum Rigid is now aware of this branch as well, and while she may not be Deus Ex, she herself is a threat to not take lightly. Moving on to another faction that we were introduced to in this event, the Tribunal finally appeared with Clemenceau as their leader. While it wouldn't be wrong to describe them as a shady organization, they definitely drew quite a bit of ire from various factions due to their actions and involvement. What was also great to see was that they were playing double agent with Marco Polo all along. Now, there are a lot of mysteries around this group as a whole, and I'm pretty sure there will be even more for us to see later on moving forward. That said, they did have some interesting reveals during this particular event, so let's quickly go over them. The first is, well, the Horsemen of Conquest. Seeing Clemenceau summon and also control the Horsemen of Conquest was a complete shock for us as a whole. The Horsemen were something that felt like a very huge concern since Revelations of Dust. It seemed like the Irish Orthodoxy had no control of these particular machinations, and that they would progressively get stronger and stronger over time as the pawn production facilities would continue to produce. This was a concern enough that even Legalicianaire Meta mentioned how dangerous these things were. Now, Richelieu mentions that she did not believe they could be controlled, and was very worried what would happen if they ever found a way out of the catacombs. Thankfully, it appears that this was not a major concern in the end, as Clemenceau has complete control of Conquest. Something interesting to note here is what this could imply about Revelations of Dust as a whole. Originally, the actions of the Vitia here seem reckless. As these factories were producing, the infection would spread more and more to the various pawns, and the horsemen in the catacombs would get stronger. Something of this nature was concerning enough that a lone meta ship girl was working to destroy the horsemen in the catacombs. Now, as they say, hindsight is 2020, so let's look at this with what we know now. When Richelieu and Implacable were in the catacombs, the horsemen and their pawns were engaging each other. War and Famine were busy fighting each other while the Horsemen of Death, lived up to its name. But one horseman was noticeably missing here. Conquest. We later learned that Conquest was inactive in its own territory, which was a seemingly odd occurrence. But looking at things now, Conquest was the horseman used by Clemenceau against Marco Polo. This leads me to believe that everything that happened in Revelations of Dust was Clemenceau's intentions. Even more so when you consider that Conquest had a trap set on him, one that La Galicienne Meta triggered when trying to attack it in the first place. This makes me really think that Clemenceau was powering up Conquest so that she could use him against Marco Polo once she was ready to betray her. She just wanted to make sure that she would have an ace up her sleeve in case things got dire. Another very interesting reveal was the introduction of the Microlayer Transference Network. Clemenceau mentions that they were able to obtain access to the network upon the defeat of Compiler and Rondo at Rainbow's End. With this tool, the ship girls were able to quickly traverse around the Mediterranean and deal with each conceptual anchor. In a way, this is a form of fast travel. And something interesting to point out here is this isn't the first time we've seen this. We've seen it before with Microlayer Medley, when Baltimore's team and even Enterprise herself found themselves in fog and then later in a location a bit away from where they should have been. But for Azur Lane and all the other ship girls to have access to this technology, they would be able to quickly traverse to where they need to be if any dangers came up, assuming that they were able to reach it via a node. This will definitely be a powerful tool for humanity when needed. Last but not least, the metas also got some good action in this particular event with the appearance of Memphis meta, Helena meta, Hiryu meta, and Ark Royal meta. That said, there seems to be some very clear difficulties with these three in terms of interactions. For those that don't know, these three were seemingly all members of the Ashes back when they were assaulting Observer Zero's mainframe. Unfortunately for them, this was a trap spurred on them by the Arbiters, and it's likely that none of them would have survived if it was not for the actions of the tower warping all of the Ashes away to various places. That said, it's a bit odd for both Helena meta and Memphis meta to lie or dodge questions around their identities. As to why this is the case is very much unknown. However, if I were to give my thoughts here, and please take this with a huge grain of salt here, I would like to point to a final scene with Hierophant. The Commander and Hierophant are put in a flashback of sorts, where we see Ansel and Oust arguing about the uses of the Arbiters. Oust suggests using them for their intended purposes, and finding this new threat that they've come upon, X. Ansel suggests the possibility that Hierophant's abilities could be used to allow us to communicate with Deus Ex, and maybe even give options outside of fighting it. At this point, the Commander is asked to pick a side. What I find particularly interesting here is that this could also very much represent the difference of ideologies for our two major meta factions we're familiar with, the Framework of Logic and the Ashes. The Ashes could very much be following Oust's ideas, as they have one main goal, the eradication of Observer Zero for all that she's done across the various branches. They are even willing to use Arbiter pawns against the Sirens to achieve their goals. They are using the Arbiters for their intended purpose of crushing their enemies, even if that means forcing the Arbiters to do their bidding. On the other hand, Framework of Logic might be taking Ansel's approach. They do realize the dangers of their enemies, but are willing to look into other options outside of simply fighting everyone. This can be further realized by the alliance of the Framework of Logic metas with the Tower. They are willing to put aside their differences and work together to achieve things that they need to do. Now, tying this all back together, it's possible that both Helena meta and Memphis meta may be at a point where they disagree with the Ashes' ideals, and now find themselves with Framework of Logic instead, especially given their near-death experience with the raid against Observer Zero. That could explain their lie. However, the metas have been color-coded in dialogue, and as a friend of mine pointed out to me, Helena meta still is coded as orange, which we've noted as Ashes colors, while Memphis shows up as purple, which is the Framework colors. While this theory may hold up for Memphis meta, why is Helena meta still with the Ashes then? Helena more than likely still has other reasons to be with the Ashes, mainly Enterprise meta herself. And there has been some dialogue between Hiryu meta and Ark Royal meta, where Hiryu expresses some concern for Enterprise and her overall well-being. It's very likely that this concern is shared across both Helena meta and Yorktown meta as well. It's possible that she might be staying with the Ashes conditionally, just to watch over Enterprise. It's really hard to say the real motive behind all of this, but it is definitely something worth noting for now. That said though, that is really about all the major items I have. I hope everyone did enjoy this video and that they found this event really enjoyable. I'll try and keep an eye on comments and answer questions that pop up. Otherwise, what was your favorite moment? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Now, I have been busy working on another major project and I'll have it showed here so you guys know about it. It is the entire story from the perspective of the Ironblood, but also focusing mostly around Bismarck. I wanted to make this project because I felt like it would make more sense as to why Bismarck Zwei exists. But at the same time, I think it's also there is enough lore around the Ironblood that we could potentially see the full story from their perspective currently. Granted, there's still plenty of story to cover, but this at least will give us a good idea where things are as of now. So hope you guys are looking forward to this video, and I can't wait to release this once it's all finished for you guys. It'll be released in the near future. Regardless though, whether you're a regular viewer or a patron supporting the channel on Patreon, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys all again real soon.